Welcome once again to the Huerta Premier Sports Uncut Podcast. We hope you guys have been enjoying all the content online on the website and the podcast. Today we got kind of a special edition, seeing that the new league year for the NFL opens up at 3 p.m. Central Time, and the free agency tampering period, which basically means that you can talk to free agents and get verbal agreements, opened up 2 days ago on Tuesday, March 7th. So there's a lot going on with the NFL, and then obviously the Combine was last week, so we'll have a lot of free agency talk and then some of the Combine talk. So just to start off, kind of give you guys a little background, the 10 teams with the most cap room, because the NFL has a hard cap that you get penalized if you break and you can't break. So the 10 teams with the most cap room this new league year are the Cleveland Browns. They have over $100 million in cap space. The 49ers have $97.4 million. Jacksonville has $75.7 million. Tennessee Titans have $61.5 million. Tampa Bay has $58.3 million. The Patriots, who are known to have a lot of cap space because they don't pay their players what they should be paid, have $55.3 million. The Chicago Bears have $51.2 million. The Colts have $47.5 million. Oakland has $43 million even. The Cincinnati Bengals have $40.5 million, and the Dolphins have $40.1 million. Of those 10 teams I named just now, only 3 of them were playoff teams, which tells you that the more cap room you have probably points to not really having the greatest team, obviously, because you don't have the best players, and unless you're the Patriots, who are, as I said, they have found a way to basically let a player go right when they have earned a big contract. They did that with Chandler Jones last year. They traded him over to Arizona, and so he had a 1-year contract with Arizona, and then he just signed I believe a $55 million extension on his contract, because he's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Could really defend the edge well, especially on the run. Really will just kind of, when the team runs the outside zone on him, he's one of those players that can really stop that. Probably one of the best in the league at that, so he definitely earned a contract. And then this year the Patriots have that going on as well, kind of. They had Martellus Bennett, basically a year rental. He helped them win the Super Bowl because Gronk went down. And then yesterday they trade for Dwayne Allen to basically replace him, so that was kind of interesting. The other 2 playoff teams in there were the Dolphins. They have $40.1 million in cap space, and they're a younger team. A lot of their key guys are rookies or on their rookie contract still, so that's why they have so much cap space. And that's the same situation with Oakland, who coming up here with Carr's contract coming up, Amari Cooper's contract coming up both in the next 2 years. Their cap space is definitely going to decline. Obviously, they rely heavily on their younger players, but when you got to pay a star wide receiver and a star quarterback the way they should be paid in this league, your cap space is going to heavily decline, so they have to be smart with what they do with their money this offseason in order to kind of keep up what they've been doing wins and success-wise. Some notable free agents that have already agreed to contracts. Calais Campbell, who is one of the best, a really good pass rusher, one of the best edge defenders in the game, really similar to Chandler Jones, actually left Arizona. He played opposite of Chandler Jones, age 33 now, but he went to Jacksonville. So the Jaguars, who have the third most cap space, they're already starting to spend their money. The Jaguars also signed Barry Church, who is an 11-year pro. He left Dallas at safety. So it's kind of interesting to see that Jacksonville spent their money on some older players right away. But I guess with an older regime kind of taking over the front office and head coaching spots in Jacksonville, they probably want players that they are familiar with and know that they can teach their system to pretty smoothly, and then help out those younger guys that are on the squad. Some other teams that have made a splash so far is Cleveland signed Kevin Zeitler. He's an offensive guard. Played for Cincinnati, a really solid player. Big loss for Cincinnati and good acquisition for Cleveland, who they also extended their other, or one of their other offensive linemen. His last name's Britton, and they gave him a huge extension. He'll be the other guard opposite of Zeitler, so they're sharing up their offensive line. And then Cleveland also signed Kenny Britt from the Los Angeles Rams, who was a former first-round draft pick at wide receiver, so obviously he has a ton of talent. He's had some off-the-field trouble, but last year he definitely made a bunch of splash plays for the Rams, so that's a big loss, and it's a good acquisition for Cleveland, especially if they can retain Terrell Pryor opposite of him. The big thing for Cleveland is you need to have somebody to throw them the ball, and right now they don't have that guy on the roster. So those are the two big moves Cleveland's made today. And then San Francisco, who has the second most cap room, they've made a couple splashes today as well, and they have a new head coach, new front office. They actually did not have a quarterback on their roster coming into today, so they signed Brian Hoyer early this morning. He was Chicago's backup last season, and when he came in and played for Chicago for 2 games before getting hurt, he played really well, and he's been, I think this is his 7th team now. He's played pretty well and pretty consistent for a number of teams. Even 2 years ago when he was in Houston, started the majority of the season, played extremely well, and kind of just got benched because they wanted to give Ryan Mallett a chance, and then obviously Hoyer got his job back and did not perform up to standards in the playoff game, and that's really when it mattered, and he ended up getting sent over to Chicago. And then San Francisco also signed linebacker Malcolm Smith, who was a former Super Bowl MVP, signed him out of Oakland, so that was a pretty good acquisition on the defensive side, especially in an area they need some improvement. And then San Francisco signed fullback Kyle Juszczyk from Baltimore, so that can definitely help in the run game. They have a pretty good power running back in Carlos Hyde, so if they can shore up the offensive line and then have Juszczyk and Hyde back there, they can definitely create a power running game offense. I don't think, even though they did sign Hoyer, I don't think he's the guy you really want running quarterback all year for you. Like I said, he played really well when he gets on the field, but he's definitely not a top-tier quarterback. I wouldn't even put him in the second tier of quarterbacks. He'd be someone that could probably get you to 8-8, which he's done, like he did in Houston. He's done in, I believe, Oakland as well. But definitely not a guy that's going to make you contender. So they need to do something there at the quarterback spot, especially because they signed Marquise Goodwin today out of Buffalo at the wide receiver spot. He has a ton of speed, former Olympic track athlete, All-American track star in college at Texas. Just incredible. He had a lot of huge splash plays for Buffalo this year, just breaks loose. More of a one-trick pony than a full route tree type of guy, but can definitely be explosive. But like I said, you need somebody to get him the ball. But then they're really close to closing in on a deal with Pierre Garçon, who is that full route tree type of wide receiver. So if they have those two guys at wide out, especially after losing Torrey Smith, that's definitely huge for them to get some players out there that can play wide receiver. And then they also re-signed Jeremy Curley, who was their leading receiver this year. But like I said, without a guy to throw the ball to them, it's pretty questionable if they're going to be able to do anything, especially in a Kyle Shanahan run offense, Kyle Shanahan's their new head coach. And we saw what he did with Atlanta this year. He likes to really throw the ball downfield, stretch the field, use the run to set up the pass, but can't set up a pass if you don't have somebody to throw the ball. And then Chicago actually is closing in on a deal to get a quarterback of their own after they released Jay Cutler this afternoon, which that was expected. I think it's time for Jay Cutler to retire, but it sounds like the Jets are interested in him. The Jets are continuously making questionable decisions at the quarterback spot. Coming into this last season, they had 4 quarterbacks on their roster, 2 of which are now free agents in Ryan Fitzpatrick and Geno Smith. I doubt either of them return to New York, especially because after the season that Fitzpatrick had last year was consistent with every other year in his career except 2015 when he led the Jets to the playoffs. He's basically consistently been proving he's not a starting caliber quarterback, yet people continue to give him a chance, but I imagine he's done in the NFL. And then Geno Smith really didn't get too much of an opportunity last year, came into a game for the Jets to replace Ryan Fitzpatrick, got hurt, but in the time he did start for the Jets in the past, he's never really been a good starting quarterback. And then the other 2 quarterbacks on the Jets roster are Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg, who they don't think are ready to play at the NFL level and don't think will ever be ready to play at the NFL level, honestly. So if they're going to give Cutler a chance, that's pretty questionable in my eyes, because Cutler's A, been injury prone over the last few years, B, all of his teammates have pretty much not wanted to play for him because he's really shown lack of effort and lack of caring, and C, he hasn't been a good quarterback since he was in Denver. Yeah, he has a lot of talent, but he really doesn't care enough to be a good quarterback. But Chicago is on the verge right now of signing Mike Glennon, who was drafted in 2013 by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he started 9 games his rookie year, and then started he started 13 games his rookie year, and then he started another 6-7 since then. And his overall career record is 5-13. So obviously not a proven winner, but he's shown that he has a lot of talent. He's thrown for about a 60% completion rate in his career, thrown for 4,100 yards in his career and 30 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. But what really hurts him is his overall QBR is about 56.5, which isn't impressive for a quarterback. And right now the Bears are looking to pay him about $14.5 million a year, and he may. I mean, he has a lot of potential, and he may work out. But I'm looking at this situation a lot like what Houston dealt with last year with Osweiler. They just needed a quarterback, so they paid Osweiler $54 million, and he ended up obviously not doing anything good for them. Ended up on the bench this year. So probably going to happen to Glennon too. I don't think he'll get benched, but just because Chicago doesn't have anyone else on their roster. But I think if Chicago signs him, they'll still try to maybe 3rd or 4th round draft a quarterback. But definitely in my eyes not worth $14.5 million a year. Staying on the quarterback topic, and in Washington today, Kirk Cousins asked the owner for a trade, or to be traded. He sounds like he wants to go to San Francisco and help them out at their quarterback spot, especially because he's played under Kyle Shanahan for a number of years. And so he's played under Shanahan for a number of years, and he wants to play under him again. And the reason I'm kind of stuttering there a little bit is because just got an alert that the Texans, as we were talking about Brock Osweiler, traded Brock Osweiler to the Cleveland Browns for a 2018 second-round pick, a 2017 sixth-round pick, and a 2017 fourth-round pick. So that's a huge breaking news there. It's not really that good for the Browns, especially to be giving up 3 picks for Osweiler, but now I'm kind of expecting Romo, who was supposed to be cut this morning, but wasn't cut this morning because Dallas thought that they had a trade in the works. Now I'm expecting Dallas to trade Romo over to Houston, probably take all 3 of those picks and maybe a first rounder from Houston. But I'm not sure what Hugh Jackson's thoughts there are. Osweiler showed last year and the year before he's not really that. He's a good backup quarterback, but he's definitely not a starting caliber quarterback, especially to lead a team that won 1 game last season. I don't think he's going to turn that around. They're definitely better off trying to draft somebody, especially seeing that they have pick 1 and pick 12 in this year's first round draft. They could definitely get Myles Garrett with pick 1 and then go to a different draft a quarterback at pick 12, Deshaun Kaiser, who's very talented, Mitchell Trubisky, extremely talented as well, and then Deshaun Watson, who is one of my 2 favorite quarterbacks in this draft. I don't think he's the best, but he's definitely a proven winner. So, yeah, again, that trade's pretty questionable. But back to this Washington and San Francisco situation. So, Kirk Cousins wants a trade. He just lost his favorite wide receiver over to San Francisco. Washington also lost Deshaun Jackson to Tampa Bay, so now he really has no one to throw to. They re-signed Vernon Davis, who really did nothing for them this year, so they have 2 really good tight ends, and they don't want to pay Kirk Cousins a long-term deal, which if I was Kirk Cousins, I wouldn't want to play under a franchise tag for a second year, especially having the potential for getting injured, and or if he underperforms this year when he's performed very well the last 2-3 seasons and has really earned a contract. Now, if this year he has a down year, he's not going to get the contract that he honestly deserves. So if I was him, I'd be looking for a trade too, but that doesn't sound likely. But another trade that's, from the sounds of it, in the works is involving the New England Patriots and New Orleans Saints. Earlier today, the Patriots signed Stephon Gilmore, who's a cornerback from Buffalo. He was Buffalo's top corner this year. And this kind of makes the trade sound a little bit more likely to happen because the trade that's supposedly in the works is Malcolm Butler, who is New England's number 1 cornerback, probably one of the top 10 cornerbacks in the league. A straight-up swap for Butler to New Orleans for Brandon Cooks, who's just got a ton of speed at the wide receiver spot and would definitely be a weapon for Tom Brady, who really doesn't have any proven weapons. He has Julian Edelman, who plays a pretty solid game, but definitely not a game breaker. But Cooks had 2 or 3 200-yard games. I think he had a 98-yard reception, and I think he had a total of 4 or 5 receptions over 80 yards, all for touchdowns. Really good track style receiver. Someone similar to him coming into the league this year, if the Patriots don't end up trading for him, is John Ross, who I could see the Patriots draft in the first round. Both the same height, same weight, but John Ross has a little bit more speed, obviously, being the fastest person to ever run the 40, which he just broke that record last week at the NFL Combine. He ran a 4.22. The previous record was a 4.24. So a couple big trades possibly happening today, and like I said, it's the new league year hasn't even kicked off. It's 2:51 p.m. Central Time right now, and the new league year kicks off at 3 p.m. Central Time. Sticking on the topics of wide receivers and free agency, the New York Giants actually acquired a new all-star receiver to pair with Odell Beckham Jr. in Brandon Marshall, and I'm kind of questioning how that pair is going to work out. They've both had some issues kind of off the field with their antics and wanting the ball. Odell had a little bit of the antics on the field this year, kind of not trying at the beginning of the season, and then he had the whole deal with the kicking net because he was upset that he wasn't getting the ball. So having two very strong personalities on the same team, both really wanting the ball, I'm questioning how that's going to work out. Obviously, they have a good leader in Eli, but I don't see those two meshing well. And it's also going to hinder the performance and growth of their new young rookie receiver, who will be a second-year receiver next year, and Sterling Shepard, who really grew towards the end of the year. He had 8 of the Giants' 26 touchdowns. Odell had 10 of the 26, so between the two they had 18 of the 26 touchdowns. They accounted for the majority of the yards and receptions as a pair, but I can't imagine you putting Brandon Marshall in there and all three of them working well together. And another big loss for a team in the NFC today was in Minnesota. They lost their left tackle, Matt Khalil, who was a former top 5 overall pick, really highly touted out of USC, had a couple of really good years. He was Pro Bowl caliber there for a while, but he ended up going to Carolina to join his brother today, and the Vikings really are hurting for O-linemen. They only have two really solid O-linemen in John Sullivan and Alex Boone, but they had so many injuries last year. You'd expect them to attempt to make a splash at some point here in the free agency market, especially with a lot of the top O-linemen already jumping off the board. I mentioned Kevin Zeitler already off the board. Ronald Leary, former Dallas offensive guard, he's off the board already. Ricky Wagner, former Baltimore guard, he went to Detroit. And there's still a couple guys out there, but it's a really, really weak offensive line class. There's 5 or 6 guys that have a lot of potential, and then after that it drops off pretty steeply. So you'd expect the Vikings, if they want to improve their offensive line, to make a draft. And the other questionable thing that I've heard rumbles of is that the Vikings are looking for a veteran running back to sign with them after losing Adrian Peterson. They still have the potential to sign Adrian Peterson back, but this running back class in the draft is extremely deep in comparison to what we're looking at with the offensive line. So if I was Rick Spielman, I would definitely flip my philosophy and be looking for O-linemen in the free agency market and veteran O-linemen to come in, and then using the draft to get a running back early in the second round, and someone that matches better with this quick style of offense that they want to play, the check down style, someone that can really catch out of the backfield. Someone like Christian McCaffrey would be ideal, but it's doubtful he'll still be around when the Vikings pick 14th in the second round. And the other area that's actually really deep, both in this free agency market and in the NFL draft this year, is defensive backs. There's 4 or 5 really solid safeties, 4 or 5 really solid corners that are rookies, and then there's a bunch of veteran corners and safeties that are available and have already been signed in this free agency period so far. Tony Jefferson out of Arizona, he's a young safety. He got signed by Baltimore. I mentioned Stephen Gilmore. He got signed by New England earlier today. Barry Church, who was a veteran, he's in Jacksonville now. And then Antoine Bethea, he asked for his release from San Francisco and signed with Arizona, so Arizona kind of just swapped him and Tony Jefferson. Quentin Demps, Houston safety, he actually got signed by Chicago, so Chicago, there's another signing by them. And then the big name corner that I'm expecting to get a lot of money, who was Pro Football Focus, was one of their top 5 graded corners this past season. He's only 25 years old, playing on the number 1 defense in the NFL, really heavily blitzing defense, is AJ Bouye. He's actually my number 2 overall free agent that's still left out there. I'm expecting him to get a lot of money from someone, kind of a flash in the pan corner like Josh Norman, but I think he has a lot more man-to-man talent than Josh Norman. To me, Josh Norman was really a system guy, but AJ Bouye was out on the island quite a bit this year with all the blitzing Houston did. So I expect him to do a lot better with his next team than Josh Norman did this year. And then, as I mentioned, New England has Malcolm Butler out on the market. So it's been a very interesting week, a very interesting day in the NFL so far, as it's now 3 p.m. Central Time and the league year is finally officially kicked off, and we've already had a bunch of splashes made by various teams. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that little free agency NFL offseason special today. Let us know if there's anything specific you'd like to hear about next week. I'm going to try to get an article up later today regarding this Brock Osweiler signing or trading as he headed over to Cleveland in the middle of today's podcast, as I mentioned. So yeah, hopefully you guys are enjoying everything that's online. Let us know if there's anything you'd like us to write about or like to hear about in next week's podcast. Thank you for listening.
Wow.